Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the One Nation of Gamers Summer Circuit Feature Tournament number 2. This is the final day of Feature number 2. Today, we will give one more player a ticket to the Grand Final at PAX at the end of August. I'm Osmo, joined by Chucky. Chucky, how you doing this morning?
Doing pretty great, man. How about you?
Pretty great. I'm pretty great as well. I'm looking forward to seeing some card slinging action today. We got best of 7 today, so it's a little bit different of a format. Each player, when they submitted their deck list, they submitted a 4th deck list in case they made it to the semifinals. So you'll see that each player today has one extra deck added on to their lineup. So it makes it a little bit more interesting, as some players tend to practice just 3 decks for Conquest. I know Life Coach is one of those players who only ever has 3 decks in his lineup, but it forces them to actually add a 4th to their repertoire. And the way Conquest works is you have to win with all your decks, so you have to be good with it. How does the dynamic change when you go to best of 7, Chucky?
Yeah, it's something you don't really necessarily prepare for. All of the opens kind of leading up to this were 3 deck. A lot of the other tournaments are 3 deck. So naturally, it kind of feels good to have a best of 7 instead of a best of 5. Just kind of eliminates a little more variance. But at the same time, if you're not really comfortable with adding a 4th deck, and specifically if you think your lineup's really good at targeting out a few specific decks, it's hard to get a 4th deck that really goes along with that theme. So I think we'll see a lot of players just kind of bring a solid 4th deck.
Yeah, and to go over the lineup that we'll see today, the first semifinal is going to be Pavel, who made it out of Group A in first seed, and then VX14, who sort of barely scraped by in Group B as the second seed. And then the second semifinal of the day that we'll be seeing immediately after is going to be Dog, of course, from Team Complexity. He made it out in the second seed.
Place. Yeah.
Second seed of Group A. And then Hoj, who actually went undefeated. He has not lost a game in the One Nation of Gamers feature number 2. So he'll be coming in as the first seed from that. So it's a pretty stacked day of games, and all these players have proven themselves. Dog is the only invited player that's still left in the tournament, but everybody else has got here through winning the qualifier or winning through points. So first matchup, Pavel versus VX14, or Pavel. We were saying his name wrong yesterday as he corrected us. Thank you, Pavel. I still don't know if we're really saying it correct, but that seemed to be the way we're supposed to. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it looks like Pavel added a Druid deck. I feel like he can't be too excited about that. I think he probably liked his 3 deck lineup better of just Hunter, Warlock, Warrior. Those are all very strong classes, probably regarded as the top 3. And VX14 added a Rogue deck to his lineup.
The Rogue is a little bit interesting. It feels hit or miss for a lot of players. I really like to watch the deck because I think it's one of the harder decks to play in Conquest format right now, because there's a lot of decks that it doesn't have too favorable matchup against. Like a lot of it is super even, and if you make one mistake, you're pretty much out of it. I still think Patron Warrior is the most difficult deck to play, but since it's so good, a lot of players practice it more than they practice Rogue, so they're better at it than they would be at Rogue. So I'm interested to see how VX14 is going to navigate around the Rogue today.
Yeah, I mean, Rogue's one of those decks. Playing against it is probably, pretty simple. I mean, from the Hunter point of view, I think we saw Pavel even just keep that Eagle Horn, though. It's going to be a really good card in this matchup. He is playing the slower Hunter, which you don't want to be slower against a Rogue, because cards like Sap will punish you that much more, and the Rogue will have that much more time to really set up a big oil flurry turn or something to clear off your board and pressure your health total. So,
big thing here for the Rogue is you just want your your saps to line up with high mains.
Yeah.
A lot of times you have to get to the points where you get into turn 8, turn 9 before you can make big oil flurry plays where you can actually combo it and get efficient damage out of it. So you need ways to deal with these really hard to remove mid-game threats from Savannah High main. There are ways that you can remove it otherwise. I've been in a situation many times where I'm able to Azure Drake, Eviscerate, prep Phantom Knives. which seems like a lot of cards, but by that stage you've already cycled through a lot of your deck. So, and they're all 2 ofs.
Yeah, you do have to be a little concerned as the rogue here. Some of the major things are some of the hunter cards line up really well with what the rogue wants to do. Like Freezing Trap will do really well against Shredder, not so much against Violet Teacher, so that tends to be better. But then again, Unleash does really well against Violet Teacher, and the Eagle Horn Bow lines up extremely well into the 3/3s. So there are, some things going in the hunter's favor, and the other thing is when you sap Savannah Highmane, you're not actually dealing with it, so you do need something else besides that.
Yeah, Sep does buy you a turn, which sometimes can be enough, but you're right. It's still gonna probably come out just the next turn, and then you're just in the same situation that you were. You just have one more card and one more mana.
Yeah, it's really big here that VX just decided to attack. I think Pavel had a much stronger play by going Freezing Trap Hero Power and coining out a Highmane next turn. But he decided that VX-14 would be pretty unlikely to attack anyway, because you really don't want to get your Shredder Freezing Trapped. But VX-14 is just like, yeah, maybe it's just not Freezing Trap, and it wasn't. So he is aware that Pavel got that trap randomly. It wasn't a, guaranteed from hand trap. So yeah, now Pavel's going to put down the Freezing Trap. So now he knows if he wants to hold on to the Shredder, he needs to not attack with it because that's guaranteed to be freezing.
Yeah, and this is just one of those situations that becomes super tough because VX-14 just has all spells in his hand, and they're not the spells that you'd want at this stage. He does have Deadly Poison Blade Flurry, but it really doesn't help that much against Hunter because a lot of times you spend nearly your whole turn doing that, and you empty your whole hand doing that, and then they still just have a creature that they play the next turn. And it feels like you never get a creature to stick on this board. If you do, a lot of times it's because the hunter just had a really poor hand, and you probably win anyway. So it's just really tough.
Yeah, he can clear this board with the Deadly Flurry, like you said, but you're not really developing anything. You don't even leave yourself... you leave yourself with a dagger, but you're really going to need to find some more damage somewhere this game. Looks like he's going to proc both traps with that Shredder, which is pretty interesting. I would definitely say this indicates he's going to Flurry this turn, or else he would have just gone face. So it looks like it's just going to be a 1-damage Flurry. And he sort of missed an attack, yeah. Yeah, kind of like face-palming a bit. Missed 1 damage. Not... Well, it is kind of a huge deal. That can really make the difference in this type of matchup. And he does avoid taking 5 to his face, but he gave Pavel another bow charge. So he's not actually saving himself too much health overall.
Yeah. So this is a little bit awkward. In an ideal situation, he'd want to develop something and be able to sap or deal with the Highmane, but Pilot Shredder being 6 mana because of the Freezing Trap makes it so he's either only just sapping the Highmane or developing Piloted Shredder.
Yeah, I think he could have considered playing the Shredder and Deadly Poison going face and starting to threaten a lethal. He doesn't have, like, an oil would be what he would really need in that situation. He'd need to get 5 more damage if the Shredder could connect. But he's going to go for a safe play. I mean, this basically just stalls 1 turn for both players.
Oh, man.
That's a big Dr. Boom.
Yeah, he's just right in our face, too. Dr. Boom is probably the hardest card for Rogues to deal with.
Especially when he's way over there. Now, the Rogue can deal with it. But again, it's that situation where you're not developing anything. You're taking damage from the boom bots. You're using up your burn spells on minions. You're going lower. Your opponent still has a bow. And we can see Pavel does have just 2 kill commands. So it's really not going in a way that the Rogue will really ever eventually win this game. I guess he could still draw a heal bot. There's the oil. That could have come in big. Yeah, he won't have enough time the way this is going, though. If he had 1 more mana, he would maybe put himself on a track to win with like a sprint into preps and something. I don't know. It's looking really grim for him.
Yeah, he used 3 cards to deal with Dr. Boom. 3 cards, an entire turn, and he took 6 damage to deal with
Yeah.
Dr. Boom.
And I didn't even look at how the boombots hit, but it looks like he's just dead to double kill command exactly.
Yeah. It did 6 damage total. He's at 17 end of the
Mm-hmm.
turn at
11. Yep.
11. So,
So
well,
that'll do it.
that's a pretty expected result. Rogues do have a better time against mid-range hunter because they don't just die without being able to do anything than against face hunter. But it still feels like a rough matchup, especially when removal that the hunter has. If they have eagle horn bow, you don't get a creature to stick. All of a sudden, their mid-range threats just hit you so much harder. So he's going to take game one,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I really like Pavel's lineup here. This seems like you were talking yesterday about how these are the widely regarded as the 3 strongest conquest decks, and then players have to decide what they want to go with as their weak deck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's usually between like Warlock and Druid, and so he just has both of them. So I think these are probably the 4 strongest decks. Maybe with Rogue thrown in, but I think Rogue is just unless you're really confident Rogue, I'd rather take Druid in most situations.
Yep. So we're gonna have a Druid mirror this game, and it looks like Pavel is the one fortunate enough to draw Wild Growth. He actually drew 2 Wild Growths. So not sure if that's gonna be that great. He will get to curve out into like a shade if he wants, which is probably better than
Yeah.
just using the second Wild Growth.
Hmm.
And this is one of those mirrors you can really run away with. A lot of players realize this. It's that Druid doesn't have much great removal, and even when they are removing your threats, they're not developing their own. So if you just constantly put out a big board, there's almost nothing they can do about it.
Yeah, very true. And Druids have had some issues with spectator mode since the last patch on Hearthstone. Each card that has a pick one, like Ancient of War, Ancient of Lore, cards like that, sometimes it sticks onto the spectator screen. So during the match, if that happens, we might have to flip the board. Or since it's a Druid versus Druid matchup, we might have to jump out of spectator mode and jump back in real quickly. But don't get confused if the board flops. The player's hand will always line up with their webcam, so just keep that in mind.
Yep. Just kind of watch where the player's at. Their hand is always right next to them, but we'll try to keep you guys informed if anything like that happens. But it looks like a pretty powerful start from Pavel. He's going to be ahead on mana despite going second. He'll always have a 2 mana initiative due to that wild growth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely hard for VX to come back from. But at the same time, I mean, Wrath and Swipe from Pavel aren't the greatest cards to see. The 1 mana Wrath fits in pretty nicely, though, with the reduced Ancient Allure.
Yeah, that allows him to refill his hand next turn and still deal with a threat that's on the board, which is not a luxury that you usually get when playing the Ancient of Lore on turn 7. So the good thing for VX14 is that he does have things to play on every turn. He's got a reasonably sized body to play on each of these turns. So if Pavel does whiff on his drops with the Ancient of Lore, if he gets all spells, there could be a chance for VX14 to come back despite being behind on mana, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah, he's just going to try to make awkward trades for Pavel. I mean, the 4/6 does block a 5/5 pretty well, to the point where we might just not see Pavel attack. So there's one of those bugs. We switch to the other side, and there's another one of those bugs. So bear with us here. He's wrathing a Mana Addict. We're going to try to bring back Pavel's side without the bug. There's 2 5/5s, an Ancient Lore, and a Shade on Pavel's side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes the player that's behind, if they can do enough damage early on, sometimes they can just be the aggressor and go face if they draw in the combo. But we can tell that VX14 only has one piece. Pavel actually has one piece as well. So
yeah, it's also interesting. Sylvanas, one of the few ways you actually can come back from a board position as a druid. There is no silence in Pavel's hands, so it's going to be interesting to see how he decides to go about this. He really needs to do something about it. It looks like he's going to trade and wrath whatever VX steals, hoping he steals the Ancient Allure. Yep. So gets a little fortunate on that, and he's going to protect the shade with a Belcher. But we do see that VX has the Wrath for it.
Yeah, but it still is the best way to go about it.
Hmm.
You can't play around everything, and Sylvanas, you said, is one of the hardest, toughest things to deal with. So I think that's just about as clean as it gets when it comes to that.
Yeah, it's actually really unfortunate for Pavel that VX had a Sylvanas because, like you said, you want to push all that face damage, but when you're faced with the Sylvanas, you really just can't. And
Mhm.
so Pavel's actually behind in health. He's down 7 health. He just hasn't been able to hit face at all this game, despite being the aggressor, kind of.
Uproot or riot.
No uproot today. Sides player on BGH. Can't fault him for that. I'm a little surprised he didn't go with Harrison Shredder. It develops more power and more mana worth of stuff.
And
It's
more
not,
attacks.
yeah, it's not like the Ancient of War really blocks anything. The Lotheb can still go into the 3/5. It's a little susceptible to the Keeper of the Grove, but I guess it is kind of preemptively protecting him from combo
Mhm.
going into these later turns.
Yeah, definitely. I really do like having extra attacks on the board, not even just for Savage Roar, but just because um, it allows you more flexibility if you're ahead on board, I feel.
Especially with swipe, because having a 5 attack and a 4 attack, and the swipe to give you that extra 1 damage along with maybe your hero power, you basically have the flexibility to kill anything. You can swipe and have the 1 extra damage hit like this Druidal Claw and Taunt, and then Harrison Jones trades into it fine. You can hero power off something else, and then the Shredder trades into the last thing. There's just a lot of stuff you can do with it. And was he dead to combo if he didn't taunt, I wonder? That would be 21-24, so not quite. But Pavel, both players have the combo. It's obviously going to be a much bigger deal for Pavel because he seems to be the one ahead on board right now. It's going to be really tough for VX to find a way to get back.
Yeah, he does have a Sludge Belcher to block it, but his
Hmm.
hand is dead right now. He has combo plus a Wild Grow, so he's going to need to hit like another creature soon. Because Pavel is still going to be able to start to develop things. Innervate's not really that great of a draw, but it could allow him to double combo if he can't find a way. But I don't think he'll even need it at this point.
Yeah, the Belcher's really awkward for the Force Nature Savage Roar, so he can't really break through this turn. But I think he can really assume that VX doesn't have anything, like you said, besides Wild Growth and combo. It's very often that when your opponent passes on mana and they just have to hero power in these late turns, that they're sitting on those situational cards.
Hmm. So he draws an ooze, so that's a body, but it doesn't really contest anything that's on the board. So
Yeah,
he
I
needs to
would
draw
say
into
he
like
needs
a
like a swipe, but even that's not that great. In fact, Doctor Boom's fine. He'll probably still just lose this turn to the combo. Yeah,
yeah,
he's
he
dead.
does.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but I feel like Doctor Boom, from his perspective, was a fine pickup. He does need something to get back on the board and set up a lethal of his own. Just continually removing won't really win you the game ever.
Hmm. All right, so Pavel takes a quick 2-0 lead, and he finds the win with that majestic fourth deck,
Hmm.
which is a lot of times, sometimes it can be tough for players.
Yeah,
If
it can
they,
be
they don't
a big
practice four
deal.
decks. And
Yep,
so now he has Patron Warrior, and I believe Pavel was running the
handlock.
Handlock, yeah. So two pretty strong decks. Two of the decks that most competitive players will say are the two strongest decks in the meta currently. Um, so see how
Well,
he
Hunter
can.
is pretty good too, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
yeah, I
I'm
mean,
just going by the two tier lists, the power ranking lists that are available right now that take like
sure.
pro players' perspectives.
The one thing is, if Pavel gets down to this handlock deck and VX still has the priest deck, we did see that matchup in Group A already,
Hmm.
and it just wasn't even close. I mean, handlock traditionally is known to crush priest, but it was just basically VX's priest deck doesn't have a chance because it doesn't actually have the Akanite combo. It doesn't have zombie chows to kind of piece together surprise burst. It doesn't have injured blade masters to get ahead on board early. It's so reactive, and even if you react to all the threats, we just saw Pavel play Lord Jaraxxus and take over the game from there.
Basically, your win condition is you have to get him to 10, hope he doesn't have Healbot or Jiraxis, and then holy fire him 2 turns in a row.
Yeah, it's just so ridiculous to think that that's like the only way you win. So I think that this is a really key match. I think if Pavel gets down to just that handlock deck and VX, I think VX needs to manage to find a priest win against this warrior deck. I think it's very unfavored against the handlock. So
Yeah, and this matchup is going to be pretty tough for him already. And if he loses this, he's basically in a situation where he has to beat Handlock with every single one of his decks.
yeah, it's
All
pretty
four.
doable with the druid and with the hunter, but rogue, it's pretty close to even. But the priest is really where he's going to struggle.
hmm We actually haven't seen too much patron games over the last couple days. It's been a lot of Hunter. There was a player yesterday who didn't bring it, and most of the time Patron won the first game that it played.
Hmm.
Feels like we've seen a lot of Druid.
Yeah,
A
the
surprising amount of Druid.
hunter has tended to be the most dominant deck in this tournament. Patron, I would say, closely follows it. Just off the top of my head, druid, like you said, lots of representation, but not that insanely strong from what we've seen.
Yeah.
So,
This is a pretty good start for VX14, though. He's forcing inefficient use of removal slash combo pieces from Pavel. He's just having to try and deal with the board to stop lots of damage from coming in early, which is something that you have to do against Druid that you don't really have to do against other classes if you're playing Patron Warrior, because a lot of times you can just sort of smack things with your weapon and then stabilize later. But with Druid, you don't have that luxury because they'll always threaten combo as the game goes on. So that's one of the strengths that Druid has in this matchup, is that a lot of times if you have creatures on the board early, you can force out cards like Inner Rage or Whirlwind to be used defensively as opposed to being used for the combo in the mid game or later on in the game.
yeah, I mean, Pavel's really far behind right now. He had to battle rage for one twice. These Grim Patrons are sitting dead in his hand. And like you said, he had to pop off that Inner Rage. One of the things that VX14 actually kept both Shades. Not only is that just a generally good card, but it's specifically really nice against Patron Warrior, because not only does it just build up a threat that can't be answered by those weapons early on, but it threatens the Grim Patrons later. If Pavel were to go for a Patron Inner Rage Whirlwind turn this game, it would be easily answered by Force of Nature and the two Shades killing off the fresh Patrons. So there really
Yeah.
wasn't much Pavel could have done with the way that these draws kind of panned out. VX14 got essentially everything you'd want besides Harrison.
He's actually dead.
Yeah,
Because he can just force the nature spawn 2 treants, and that's exactly 22 damage. Or, well, it's 23 damage now that the shade is buffed, so... Well, that was a quick game.
yep. So pretty expected with the way the draws kind of went. Um, Not much Pavel could have done.
Yeah. All
That
right.
is
Well,
kind of why you play Druid. So
yeah, so VX14 finds a win. So his best bet is probably to throw out the Priest next.
it doesn't really matter what order you throw it in. It's basically a 50-50 no matter how you look at it.
That's true.
So yeah, he just has to kind of get lucky on a coin flip at one of these points. Again, he really can't afford to let that patron sneak through a win without his priest getting a win first.
Yeah.
Then, of course, the mind games come in of if you think your opponent's desperate to get a win, they might be likely to lead it out. So Pavel might start throwing out this handlock deck. Who knows? Looks like it's going to be handlock versus rogue. So for VX, this is kind of now, it's not a terrible matchup to lose. I mean, you always feel bad about losing, but it wouldn't really seal the series up, whereas I think losing to that patron deck without getting a priest win first would seal the series.
Yeah. So the keys in this matchup for the rogue is basically just to have a way to deal with the first threat.
Yeah, and you really
That's
don't
what it
want
comes
that
down
way. You really don't want that way to be sap. It's
Yeah.
basically the high main problem, but epitomized even more. If all you do is sap that first threat, which is coming out as early as turn 4, they'll just replay it, and then you're lacking a sap to push through late game. So there's a lot of issues with just doing that now. I wouldn't be surprised to see a prep sprint this turn. Go up to 9 cards, have a lot of tools to deal with whatever comes out. He has the backstab. He has 1 sap. Maybe if he draws another, he's willing to throw out the first a little more liberally.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be enough of a good enough hand to be able to combat it. Now the thing is, if he prep sprints this turn and he doesn't find a creature next turn or the second sprint, and all he's doing on turn 4 is like sapping and re-daggering, then he's going to be in a really rough spot. He does find a shredder, so shredder is a good thing to contest a board, because you can throw it in and still be left with something on the board to maybe combo the next turn. But
the shredder's completely fine here. I mean, it doesn't immediately remove that Drake, but it's a lot better than taking 8 from a giant, just taking 4 from a Drake. Not as huge of a deal. And actually, Pavel doesn't have anything too great on turn 5. He's missing kind of like another threat or a Sledge Belcher. So VX14's not in the worst of shape if he can just develop this Shredder. Now, if he overreacts, that might put him even further behind, because like if he were to sap this turn, Pavel would actually be completely happy about that. He'd just replay the Drake again. It'd be a 4-10 then, and he would basically get something to do on turn 5 when he had nothing.
Yeah. Really hoping for a Mountain Giant there, but ends up just having to play the Ancient Watcher on the board, which VX14 is going to be really happy about, because that's going to buy him a lot of time, and time is exactly what he needs. Because basically how you win this matchup as a rogue is you basically just make a huge flurry turn, like in the mid game. You keep them sort of like I feel like it sort of plays similarly to Druid, where you want things to stick on the board for your combos later on. You don't want to get them to Molten Giant range until you kill them, basically.
Yeah.
Which can be a little bit harder as a rogue than it is for a Druid, but definitely possible because of just how much cycle you can have in the early game. He had Prep Sprint early on, which is a great tool to help you do that.
Actually going to sap this Ancient Watcher.
It's going to burn a card.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not too relevant. He knows there's no threat. So what he's doing is he's making sure no threat really comes out from Pavel, but Pavel actually did tap into the Lotheb, so there is a threat. So I mean, I'm not sure how much I like that sap. I'm pretty interested by it. It was a very unconventional play.
Ooh.
Yeah, he gets to remove Lotheb, and now's basically the time when the hand lock, if he can draw like one more threat, he'll be able to just chain threats. He can consider Hellfire, yeah. So he could have just Doctor Boom this turn, but definitely respecting the minions from the rogue side.
Yeah. On turn 7, 23 damage is definitely possible with 2 creatures on the board.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to do. I mean, oil with flurry is only really worth 9. Deadly's worth 4 more, so that's still only 13.
Prep oil, blade flurry would have been lethal.
Okay, TJ. Prep oil.
It happens a lot.
Okay.
It is exactly 7 mana.
Yeah, it is a 4-card combo. I feel like that's one of those things you can't play around forever. Eventually, this Doctor Boom will just have to come down. He could Siphon this turn, could Owl and do something. But one of these turns, he's going to have to just play out Doctor Boom.
Yeah.
You've already seen a sap out, so you know your opponent doesn't have an oil set up, so you want to make an awkward turn for him. Now, Drake actually increases the damage a little bit, so how much would he have? Looks like he's going to remove it, but
okay. He would have had 5 plus 6, 11, plus an extra 5, so 16. Would have had 16.
Yeah, damage. 16. 16 guaranteed. He could have made that 17 by going for the Blood Mage and hoping the oil hit. So still not quite there since he wouldn't have tapped. With the deadly poison, suddenly things get pretty interesting. And this is kind of like what I was talking about. It's you can play around things, but the more time you give the rogue without pressuring them, you see VX has drawn in even more combo pieces now. Now he has the from hand damage from the South Sea. He's got extra damage from the deadly. Now it feels like you have to taunt up every turn, but you really just want to double giant one of these turns.
Yeah, and VX14, this turn is going to be huge because he's going to be able to play like Loatheb Shredder on an empty board. The one thing is he wants to dagger up, so he might consider just playing like Loatheb.
Yeah, you can.
You can set up for lethal next turn.
You really want to dagger up.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you don't need to dagger up because you can fit South Sea, dagger, deadly, oil, flurry, but then you can't fit in the sap. So maybe
Yeah.
you can consider like Lotheb, Blood Mage, Hit Face, Redagger.
Okay. Loatheb Shredder is still really good.
Yeah, this should work out fine. I think he's going to be able to push through for this lethal.
Yeah, because you know that he hasn't played threats. Like, he didn't have the Mountain Giants early. He's not in range to play Molten plus anything else unless he's just playing Molten Sun Fury, which is a weak play. So now what
It's
Pavel's
just
going to have to
dead,
do is going to have to Belcher?
I guess. I mean, this kind of comes back to it. I feel like you played a little too defensively, a little too early.
Yeah.
If you just, it's Rogue's one of those decks you can't really wait out. If you just let them build the combo pieces, they will kill you. So VX has the second sap. That's plenty of damage to get through this. Think he had it anyway, but
Yeah.
obviously the easiest way is just throw out that sap. So that's
Yeah,
going to do it.
just-
VX going to tie up the series at 2.
Yeah. Very well played. I do agree. I think Pavel did play a little too passively. You can't play around everything every turn. Sometimes you have to get out your threats earlier rather than later. You're okay with taking damage because a lot of times if you get to the point where you play Moltens, as long as you're not too low, you force them to have a lot more removal and a lot like second sap plus other things. You force them to take dagger hits. If you put more pressure on early on, you force them to get low health. They have to think twice before they smack into a big giant. So just tie it up. So Priest and Hunter left for VX14, and still Patron Warrior and Handlock left for Pavel.
Okay, so VX got the matchup he wanted. He got the Priest into the Warrior, which isn't actually that bad. Now, the Priest does have a little bit of trouble pressuring, so the Warrior does have a lot of time to build up their perfect combo, and Emperor is going to be one of those cards that really helps that if Pavel can draw into the right pieces early on. But the Priest, if it can get a little bit of pressure, it does have all the board clears it needs. VX has 2 Holy Fires, so he'll have no trouble staying at 30 health. If he has any weapon removal, and he can get rid of both Death Bites somehow, that's really key. Reduces the burst damage Pavel can do from hand sizably.
So it is possible for the Warrior to win this matchup by just doing 30 damage in a single turn.
Yep, that's basically, of the 2 win conditions of Patron, making Patrons or going for a big combo turn with the Charge Frothings. Charge Frothings is the more guaranteed way to win this matchup. You really don't want to give your opponent the opportunity to use things like Shadow Madness and Light Bomb, and even Shadow Word Pain. So you really just want to save everything up. Emperor to reduce them all, charge them all out, and kill your opponent. And we're going to see a lot of pass turns here, which favors the Warrior quite a bit. I mean, there's really not much going. I'd like to see him just, sit on 1 here. Play around Shadow Madness. You also really kind of want to save that Dread Corsair just for the combo turn. It adds another 3 damage, and it adds another target to be whirlwinded, which can be, up to 6 more damage if you have both the Frothings.
For free, also, with the Despot equip, so.
Yep,
Yeah,
completely
and
free.
you really need to be patient with the Emperor Thorsan here is a big thing, because... Oh, well, guess not.
Yeah, this is gonna get punished a bit. I mean, he didn't reduce Grim Patron's the only card he reduced, but since he didn't reduce the War Song or the Frothing, the only thing he can really, yeah, he can't really combo that in with anything. So I feel like this was really, like you said, greedy. Gets punished by Holy Fire, gets punished by Shadow Word Death, which VX didn't have, but there's a second Death Bite. Now, Pavel has to be really careful about how he uses these Death Bites. You really want to value the second one. But the first one, I guess he's just going to use for Battle Rage. This works out fine. I feel like if he just waited on this, waited to draw these next few cards, he's going to draw 5 here. Then he'd be able to get a much better Emperor.
He's going to draw. Well, no, you can't even use the second Battle Rage because he'll overdraw.
Yeah, you definitely hold on to that. Overdrawing is pretty key in this matchup. Usually it's not a huge thing, but Patron Warrior is one of those few decks where it's realistic to just go through your entire deck.
Yeah. There's a chance that you just can go aggressive against Priests and just beat them out if their removal doesn't line up, if you can go aggressive early enough. But it's very rare, especially with how reactive VX14's deck is. He's got, we've talked about it over the course of the weekend so many times. Double Shadow Madness, double Holy Fire, double Light Bomb. Like, he's got so much removal, it's ridiculous. And he even runs double Shadow Word Pain as well. So
Yeah.
it's just, it's going to be hard. I mean, even though he's been pretty liberal with how he plays all of his stuff, like his Emperor Thorson not really hitting many good combo pieces, he's still drawing through his deck, and you can still do big combos with 10 mana, even if nothing important is reduced.
Yeah, if you can get the War Song Frothing with a Whirlwind, with the Deathbite Whirlwind, that is generally still enough. Given that there are enough targets on the board. Now, he did throw out both of those Pirates, and he doesn't really have anything else that's really that great reduced, so it could be pretty hard. He is getting a lot of chip damage in now, which isn't as relevant against Priest because they have the Healing Hero power, but if you can get enough and pressure enough, it can be relevant that you kind of kill your opponent super fast.
Yeah. So he's starting to rack up some damage pieces. Oh yeah, and Pavel also runs Grom, so he could realistically just use Grom first, and then force it to be removed, and then use combo the next turn. Like, you're guaranteeing damage.
Yeah,
and
it
getting
looks
it
like
out
he's
before
just
mind control.
going for it. So a very different style from Pavel. This, like you said, does play around mind control. It's 1 turn early. So that could be probably just game. I mean, VX14, this is just going to get executed. He will heal up the Grom to remove the Enrage. Pretty clever. It could be pretty tough to enrage that again. There is a Taskmaster, but he probably needs that for the execute. He could go Despite, Fiery War Axe, execute, Taskmaster. Would that do it? That would do it, I think. So if this isn't lethal, it would be a slight misplay. But I would think this is just lethal. He went for this so fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be an extra 8 damage plus 6. It's 14.
Yeah. Yep. So both ways were 14 damage, and a very aggressive style from Pavel coming out. I guess this really comes back to him playing Gromish in his deck, which is a pretty key card for going for a much more aggressive style. It just adds that extra 12 as early as turn 8. So pretty well played by him. I think he kind of knew that he had the liberty of going for that kind of play style.
It's funny how people's opinions change on that card, because like a week ago, nobody was putting Grom in their deck, and even so early as like Friday, I was saying, oh yeah, most Western players don't put Grom in their deck. They've been switching over to cool Taskmaster, double Unstable Ghoul, or like putting more early drops to go full in on their combo, more cycle. but I've seen Grom in almost every single patron that I've played against, in the or seen in tournaments in the past like
Yeah,
3 days.
I guess it has a lot to do with the meta. It's definitely a meta call. It's very good against control decks like we just saw. It lets you really threaten your opponent with combo that much more, that much earlier. And it gives you a little extra push. I know from playing a lot of like, not really control, but just like fatigue decks where you take your opponent, you try to grind out all their cards, and you get both War Songs out of the way, and you think you've won, but there's still that Gromish. That can be a really big deal against those kind of decks. Whereas against the more aggressive decks like Hunter, you obviously don't really care about an 8 drop. You want those double unstable ghoul, double slam. You want all the early game you can possibly get. So people have been optimizing their list for anti-aggro, especially on ladder. But going into these tournament scenarios, you know you can only lose to Hunter once. It's not like you're going to be facing Hunter every other game. It's not like you're going to be playing against as much aggro. And so
Yeah,
that's a big consideration players take into account.
yeah. Phoenix 14 looks a little bit frustrated because Pavel's cards are just lining up perfectly here. Both Owls in his opening hand, plus Dark Bomb to be able to deal with it. And Defender of Argus to be able to cleanly take out his Lothep. This is pretty rough for VX so far in this game. Usually this is a pretty good matchup because a lot of times you can just get in lots of free damage in the early game, but it's just not really lining up for him right now.
Yeah, and it's not like VX has any saving grace here. I mean, even if he was able to pull out this game, Game 7 would be his very interactive priest deck against, a not so interactive handlock deck that would just kind of play too many threats for you to really ever answer.
Yeah. And when the Hunter has to start playing defensively against the Handlock, I guess that's offensively as well, just because you need to get through the taunts in order to hit the face. But um,
Yeah, he
he's going
needs
to
to
be
pick
able to
up
play Dr.
something.
Boom next turn.
Okay, a Shredder's not too bad. He really needed to draw something to play this turn instead of a reactive card or a situational card like that Houndmaster.
It's Dr. Boom or Giant this turn. And I think Dr. Boom's better. I think the Giant is a little... Oh, okay.
This way he gets to fit in the Mortal Coil is what he's thinking, so
Yeah,
makes sense. He'll take a little less damage. He has the double heal bot. I
it's a
should be able to
lot more vulnerable
stabilize.
to Freezing Trap, but I guess he's
Yeah.
not too worried about that.
Well, if your opponent plays Freezing Trap, you just play heal bot and pass. And then they have to kill off your heal bot, and then you play the second one, and they have to kill that one. Freezing Trap can almost turn into a liability against Handlock. Unfortunately, he can't really anti-Killbot and Shadow Flame this turn. Yeah, he didn't pick up anything to play with the Shadow Flame. He can still draw a Watcher or BGH. BGH wouldn't work, I suppose. So I wouldn't be surprised to just see... He could go for Belcher. It's a little susceptible to Owl, and then you're suddenly down to 5.
Mhm.
Could even die to Owl Kill Command. Or no. Yeah, Owl Kill Command would do it.
I think there's some amount of risk that you have to take with this matchup inherently, though.
Hmm.
Like, if you try and play around everything, you're just never going to win as the Handlock.
Yeah, you do have to kill the Hunter before his Hero Power kind of clocks you. So generally you want to play taunts first, heals later to get out that Mullen Giant, but in this case it might be wise to just play the heal to be safe, which is what he's going to opt to do.
Yeah. Stampeding Kodo from the Web Spinner. Not going to be that useful.
Yeah, so if that was a Huffer and 1 dagger out of 2 went face, he would have been dead with that Sledge Belcher play, so... Hey! Hey!
That exactly happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's just basically playing around all the kind of different shenanigans that can happen.
Yeah.
He feels like he's far enough ahead that he can, wait on that Sludge Belcher. He will take a lot of damage because he didn't taunt up, but obviously the Owl was there anyway for VX. So now something like a Sun Fury Protector would probably lock this game up. But
I I think just like a Shadow Flame heal bot to lock it up because VX is out of cards.
Yeah. Yep. So now Pavel finally gets to start hitting face with this mountain giant,
Hellfire
and
works even better because you can fit in a Molten Giant with the heal bot and
yep,
put him on a lethal next turn.
yep. This lethals him as long as a giant and the heal bot survives. So that's probably yeah, that's gonna do it with the Shadow Flame. I think VX is just dead no matter what. Yeah, he's just dead to board. So
All
that's
right.
gonna do it.
Pavel secures himself a spot in the finals for the day. He guarantees himself at least $1,500 and at least 16 Geico points. And 16 Geico points is actually a lot. For winning an open, you get 10. So he already guarantees himself more points than he already got for actually winning one of the opens. So he's in a really good spot here. He's one win away from qualifying for the one best of 7 victory away from qualifying for the grand finals at PAX, which guarantees him even more money, and it also guarantees him at least 10 world championship points. And he also has a chance to win like $20,000. So it's going to be a pretty big deal for him. He's going to have to go up against Dog or Hoj, which is going to be the next matchup. So that's going to be a pretty good one.
Yeah, I feel like these are some of the more kind of high-profile players. Some viewers might not know Pavel, but within the European kind of ladder scene and even the qualifying tournament scene, he's very well known. He's no stranger to qualifying for tournaments and winning opens, so this is kind of just another day for him. But obviously, it's pretty above average making the finals, so
Yeah.
almost there. Just one more, like you said.
Yeah, VX14, he got a chance to participate in both groups since he won 2 opens. And he will go home with $750 for third/fourth place, and he'll also go home with 10 Geico points. So VX14, with 2 open wins and a fourth place finish in a feature, is still one of the front runners to qualify for PAX with points. So he definitely cannot be disappointed with his performance, and $750 is still a good amount of money. Keep in mind, guys, the next open for North America is actually tomorrow. So you can head over to liquidhearth.com on the right side of the screen under upcoming events. Any qualifier number 5, I believe it is. Yeah, number 5. So if you want to participate, have your chance to win some money, some Geico points, some World Championship points, compete in that. You can sign up tomorrow. The next EU qualifier is on the 22nd. So I believe that's Wednesday. So you can head over to Liquid Hearth and get the exact dates there. And also head over to ONO or geico.onog.gg during the break. Get some more information about the tournament and sign up to win your official TSM PC. But next semifinal between Dog and Hoj is coming up next. Don't go anywhere, guys. More summer circuit action right after this.